At this exact moment, 50 years ago today, I was arrested, charged with 2 counts of selling psychedelics, and it was under the Rockerfeller Drug Laws, and I went to prison with a sentence of 1 year to life. That was obviously a life-changing day, and I don't normally go on Thursday nights, but I want to be on at the exact moment that the arrest happened. It happened at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time, December 4th, 1975. That was how I opened the show Thursday night, December 4th. It was the 50th anniversary of my arrest. I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who's on here for the politics. This is going to be a non-political episode. This is story time, and because so much happened 50 years ago, and even 50 years ago, 50 years ago tomorrow, another event happened. 50 years ago today, I had just spent the weekend in Albany County Jail. Got lots and lots of visitors, which was nice in a way. But man, the visiting room, if you're going to get arrested, don't get arrested in Albany County, New York. You get a visitor, and it wasn't a microphone, it was a window. And way below the window was a little thing with like holes in it to talk through. But the thing of it is, you had to have your ear to it to hear what the other person was saying. So you had to bend down and talk into the holes to talk. And then you had to bend down and put your ear to the holes to hear. So you could never actually make eye contact with a person live during a conversation. That was one of many features of Albany County Jail. I remember being really surprised going to the dining hall, and all they gave you was a spoon. No knife, for sure. Not even a fork. You got a spoon. You had to eat. And oh my God, the food was so bad. It was so bad. But the food in Albany County Jail was gourmet compared to what they served you in the basement of the courthouse while awaiting hearings, which basically consisted of a big hunk of Spam in between 2 pieces of white bread. To this day, I have never eaten Spam again. I've written a story about how much I hate Spam because of my experience in the Albany County Courthouse. So if you watched the last video, and it'll be mentioned in the story I'm going to read, I'm actually going to read a story I wrote about the events of December 10th, 1975, which is 50 years ago tomorrow. And I won't preview too much of it. I'll just go ahead and read it when the time comes. But I want to point this out. Long story short, my bail was set at $50,000. Now, to convert 1975 money to 2025 money, you kind of have to multiply by a factor of 6.02. Just say 6 for argument's sake. So $50,000 in 1975 was the equivalent of $300,000 in 2025. So that's just a little context for you. Anyway, the events of December 10th, 1975 were huge. Ironically, I used to deliver sandwiches to the campus for a company called Walt Subs, and the shift leader put a bumper sticker on my car that said John Klein for county judge. There's a lot of irony in the fact that I was driving around with a bumper sticker for John Klein, which I'll get to in the story I'm about to tell. So this is not going to be a video. I am going to read a story that I wrote 20 years ago about stuff that happened 50 years ago. So I'm going to read the story, and I'm going to comment as I see fit, as Lionel would say. December 10th, 1975, and again, that's 50 years ago tomorrow. Another court appearance. This time it was to be a bail reduction hearing in front of an appellate court judge. They allowed my attorney to consult with me in the basement of the courthouse during the lunch break. He stood in front of the cage in which I was locked. Without looking up, I offered him half of my Spam sandwich through the bars. He declined the offer. Who could blame him? In a different kind of time and place, I doubtless would have offered him cheese and crackers or some other tersy hors d'oeuvres, and a glass of wine, something just a tad more becoming in any case. But half a Spam sandwich was the best I could do that day. So I said to him rather eloquently, "Sorry, it's the best I can do today." He graciously accepted my half-hearted apology and pulled some papers out of his briefcase. And who can blame my lawyer? And this is me talking now. Who can blame my lawyer for eschewing a half a Spam sandwich? Anyway, 5 days earlier, this was December 5th, 1975. This was the day I was arraigned, after spending the worst night of my life between getting busted, getting the good cop, bad cop treatment, getting thrown in a cold jail cell. It was December in Albany, New York. It was cold. All I had in there was a stone bench and a toilet. I was wearing a ski parka, but if I took the parka off to use as a pillow, it was freezing. And if I kept the parka on, I had nothing to rest my head on. 2 o'clock or so in the morning, a guard woke me up rather nastily, took my shoelaces, and then the next morning was the arraignment. So the story continues. The written story continues. 5 days earlier. At my arraignment, the district attorney had argued strongly for a high bail amount for me. He said I was charged with a serious crime which carried a mandatory life sentence. Yeah, those were the Rockerfeller Drug Laws. You had a mandatory life sentence. Yeah, it was, and I mean mandatory. I mean, if you were convicted of an A3 felony or higher, you had to go to prison. There was no way out of it. So anyway, which carried a mandatory life sentence that I represented a major flight risk. I disagreed on both counts. I, at the time, considered myself to be a political prisoner. I now realize I was guilty. But at the time, I was 21 years old and rather angry. I, at the time, considered myself to be a political prisoner and a victim of arbitrary enforcement of a reactive law based upon little more than fear. Besides that, I really had no, and as far as flight risk, I really had no desire to leave Albany, a city I'd grown to love after 4 years at the university. So where would I flee if I were to flee? I kept those thoughts to myself. To do otherwise would have caused the people who were trying to help me undue pain and stress, and this situation was already more painful and stressful than anybody cared to contemplate. You know, I got to keep in mind, I was busted the night before. My parents got the phone call. They drove up to Albany. They're in the courtroom, and I'm being arraigned. The judge asked the district attorney how much bail he recommended. $25,000, Your Honor, was his reply. I cringed, and when I saw the helpless and hopeless look on my father's face, my heart sunk to depths I had only imagined in my nightmares. Now, again, mind you, we're talking $1975, $25,000. My dad, my wonderful, wonderful dad, worked his ass off as a tool and die maker. That was just an impossible number. 25 grand. My father was a tool and die maker and had been working in the same factory since my earliest memories and before. We didn't own a home, so getting a bail bond was seemingly out of the question. Then things got worse. The Honorable John Klein, he of the bumper sticker on my car a few years earlier, the Honorable John Klein of the Superior Court of Albany County in the state of New York had a question for the district attorney. It was sort of a leading question. He asked the following question. The defendant is charged with 2 felony counts. You mean $25,000 for each count, don't you? My lawyer didn't object to this question. Somehow I thought he should have said something like, objection, and then some words becoming of his stature as a so-called officer of the so-called court. But my lawyer said nothing, and I was too stunned to say a word. Did I just hear that correctly? Did the judge, who's supposed to be neutral, actually just tell the district attorney that he wanted him to take a more extreme position? Apparently, there was nothing wrong with my hearing or my perception. The district attorney stammered out his reply, yes, Your Honor, that is what I meant. The Honorable John Klein of the Superior Court of Albany County in the state of New York was next to speak. He said bail is set at $50,000, next case, and then he banged his gavel. So that's what happened on December 5th. So there I am, I'm in jail on $50,000 bail, a hopeless, hopeless amount of money. And the thing of it is, I had no idea how I was going to approach this case. I had no idea I was going to fight it, plea bargain it. I know I'm looking at charges ranging from 1 to life to 8 1/3 to life. I knew that any legal wrangling would have a much, much higher chance of success if I was bailed out. Fighting this from inside jail was gonna be impossible, and raising, again, the equivalent of $300,000 in today's money was also seemingly impossible. So all my hope of basically having a life rested on the December 10th bail reduction hearing that my attorney, Michael Feit, had arranged. And when I went to the hearing, I had hope. I had a little bit of hope for the first time in a week. So back to December 10th. This is back to the story. From inside my cage, I asked Mr. Feit, that was my attorney's name, if he thought we had a chance of getting the bail reduced at the appeal hearing we were presently awaiting. It was a stupid and obvious question, but since I had given up on my meager efforts at being a good host, it felt appropriate to at least attempt to be participatory in the business at hand. I was never much good at small talk anyway. Hey, I'm still not good at small talk, even though I blather. I don't remember his exact words, but he used more or less a whole lot of "I am billing you by the hour" parlance to state the fact that he had no idea how the hearing might go. However, Mr. Feit was far more eloquent once the appeal hearing began. He gave a rather passionate argument regarding my character and my lack of criminal record. He made me sound like an absolute saint. He painted a picture of me that was so flattering, I wanted to go outside and erect a statue of myself. If I had a pen and paper, I would have handed it to myself and asked for my autograph. And when it was the prosecutor's turn to talk, he simply stated that he did not dispute any of the facts stated by Mr. Feit. My parents were at the hearing. It was the first time since my arrest I had seen expressions of hope on their faces. And I sure as hell had an expression of hope on my face. Anyway. As all eyes turned to the judge, who was apparently about to rule, the only question I had was whether I would immediately go home with my parents or whether I would need to spend one more night in Albany County Jail awaiting the bail procedure to be formalized. The Honorable John Conway of the Court of Appeals gave his ruling. He said that while the evidence seems to favor a lower bail, he has deep respect for Judge Klein. He said he was certain that Judge Klein had valid reasons for setting the bail where it was, and he was therefore reluctant to overrule in this case. Bail remains the same, hearing over. My mother cried, and this was sad. This is the press. One of the early things. So I'll read it. I'll read it as it says in the story, and I'll comment if there's something to say. My mother cried. In her grief, she said she would do anything to get me out of jail, that she'd even sell her body. It was just my mother's unique, over-the-top way of expressing herself. A reporter for the Albany Times-Union was there in the courtroom. She felt it necessary to run a story about the hearing in her newspaper the next day. The story was on page 2. Very little was mentioned regarding the actual case. The headline read, "Weeping Mother Considers Prostitution to Aid Jailed Son." I've searched and searched and searched for a copy of the December 11th edition, December 11th, 1975 edition of the Albany Times-Union, to no avail. I don't have exactly sentimental memories of it, but I wouldn't mind having the clipping. So if anybody has a way of getting the December 11th Albany Times-Union. By the way, if you look at the December 5th and December 6th, the story of my bust is there on page 2. I never did make page 1, and that's probably okay. Probably okay. Anyway, back to the story and the gist of what I am talking about in tonight's Blather. An hour later, so an hour after the bail wasn't reduced. I sat numbly in the back of the sheriff's car. I was handcuffed, of course. I was being driven back to the unpredictable horror of Albany County Jail and the indeterminate prison term that surely awaited on its heels. I just wanted to go home. I felt the shadow of deep despair being cast over me and tried to think about nothing but my breathing. My sanity depended upon being bailed out, and I had just found out that I was not likely to ever be bailed out. And then I decided to turn around and look out the back window of the sheriff's car. And when I did, I realized that if I was facing backwards, the back window looked like any other back window. If I looked forward, of course, I was staring at two sheriffs through a wire mesh partition. I was locked in and handcuffed and alone in the back seat. The sheriffs were in deep conversation as the car moved down the highway. They weren't paying much attention to me. Music was coming from the car radio. I got on my knees in the back seat and faced the rear of the car. It was a bit awkward to do with my wrists in handcuffs, but nevertheless didn't take me long. I rested my chest against the backrest of the seat and rested my chin on top of the backrest, and I just watched the highway unfold behind us. After a few moments, the song Midnight at the Oasis by Maria Muldaur began to play on the radio. I just allowed the music to take me as I gazed out the back window. The music began to transform me, and soon I was simply a passenger in a vehicle moving down the highway, staring out the back window of what could have been any car in the world. And Maria Muldaur's dulcet voice carried me far from the reality of the situation. Pleasant thoughts formed white light and surrounded me and lifted me and carried me far, far away from the sheriff's car and everything that lay in my path. I was transformed into an entity that existed in harmony with the positive forces of the universe, and I no longer felt terrified nor isolated. It occurred to me that home is not a place. It's a frame of reference from deep within ourselves. And I realized that I was at home. I wanted the song to last forever. And in a sense, it did. And in a sense, it has. It was an unforgettable lesson in the power of music. And an unforgettable pause to my nightmare. It recharged me and empowered me to face the rest of the day and gave me new perspective on all that lay beyond. When the song was over, I sat back down in the seat. We weren't far from our destination, Albany County Jail. I don't think the sheriffs ever noticed that I turned around for a few minutes, and they had no way of knowing how far away I had gone for those few minutes. After that, I've always had, of course, a special feeling of warmth for Maria Muldaur for showing me the way home. You know, it's been one of my dreams, and I'm lazy and maybe fear of rejection or something. I know people who know Maria, and I'd love to have her see this story, but I haven't made the attempt yet. Maybe now I will. I like to think Maria would like this story. And now there's an epilogue to this, a true epilogue. 10 years later, because I got married December 3rd, 1985. So yeah, this was the the December 3rd and 4th are the 10, 20, 30, 40 anniversaries of my wedding and of my arrest. And I'm not going to comment any further on that. But anyway, the epilogue. It was my wedding night. Lydie and I were staying. Lydie is my ex-wife and the mother of my children. Lydie and I were staying at the High Sierra Hotel in Lake Tahoe. We decided to check out the show. Maria Muldaur was headlining that night. It was a small and intimate club. Our table was in a great spot. Maria's performance was splendid. It was the first time I'd ever seen her perform live. For her finale, she performed a song that had been a hit for her in the 70s. The song was Midnight at the Oasis. While she was singing it, and this is no shit, seriously, a true story. While she was singing it, she moved across the floor and stood right in front of our table. She looked at me and smiled. And then she winked at me. If she only knew. Yeah, if she only knew. Sometimes I can't help thinking that on some level, she actually did. Humor has blathered. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it.